everyone, welcome to the final episode in this AE100 series. In this we're going to be primarily going over sound deliveries because we're going to be continuing the recording from last week. So I'm going to assume that you've already caught up on last week's and you're already familiar with the direction we're going, so let's just jump straight into it. So for sound, I will just duplicate my sequence again, my main lock cut sequence, and I'll bring it into a sound bin. So for sound, I've made two bins under to sound. I've got one called lock delivery and one called lock media, and you'll see why in a bit. So first thing that I would do, just because it's the easiest one, is I would normally open up my markers window, select my ADR notes and export those. But since we don't actually need any ADR notes, so I'll just give that one a purple finger tag just to note that. And you can see under sound here on my spec sheet, I've just put a little note under the ADR list that this isn't required, just so that I know. And then I can just tick that one. But getting back to our Avid. So since I'll be doing a bunch of stuff to the timeline, I will normally bring in my locked cut, color it red, and then duplicate it, and then get to work on the duplicate. This is just in the off chance that I stuff something up, and then I've got a backup of the master of the lock cut there for me. Let's do split WAVs first, since they're nice and easy. All we need is our groups. Now this is actually where one of the newer features of Avid 2022.10 come in. So if I have my audio mixer open, you can get this under Tools, Audio Mixer. Then you can see here, I've shown how to do this in my video going over 2022.10's features. I've made these groups for dialogue, music and sound effects of the tracks, and if I just click on one, it activates those tracks. And we can enable and deselect all of those specific tracks at once, nice and quickly. And it's going to be very handy for doing our split WAVs, which we're about to do right now. So I will have them all deselected. As you can see on the timeline back there, they're deselected. Then I'll just click dialogue, and then with no marks on my timeline, I will go file, output, export to file. If I ever don't go through this menu, by the way, it's because I have that mapped to a key to do export. And then we'll just make a setting for doing our split WAVs. So we'll do export as audio stereo. Sample rate and bit depth I'll leave as the project, because that should always be 48 kilohertz, 24-bit. And my project settings, which I set up at the start under project creation, audio format wave is fine. And I'll use selected tracks. So it's only going to export a wave file using the selected audio tracks, which is my dialogue ones. And then I can go save and just add underscore dialogue. Now we can just navigate to our sound folder under split WAVs and export. And these, generally speaking, are very quick. I was recently working on a sitcom for the BBC, and it only took about 50 seconds to do a split WAV per group, and each episode was about a half hour. So exporting just audio is always fairly quick. So I can disable my dialogue, enable sound effects, and do it again. Cool, and that's us got our split WAVs done. Look in our sound deliveries. There. That gets a green tag. And I'll tick it off here. Now, taking a look at this, what else is needed? MXF audio. Well, I happen to have it very neatly organized. If I look in my Avid Media Files folder, you can see from these finder tags indicate that it is the treasurer. And all of this date format is my vision, and this date format is my sound. So there's day 1, 2, 3, 4, of my sound. So I would just drag and drop those into my MXF audio folder. Again, this is one that's not essential. I'd say a lot of sound places wouldn't really ask for this, but I've just found they tend to appreciate it. It's a nice one to give them, and it also serves as a nice backup if for any reason the source audio is lost or someone can't find it anyway. But speaking of source audio, the keen among you will have noticed that's already got its green tag, and there it all is there. Copy that in ahead of time. Now you might not necessarily have this if you're working on offline in an edit for a show or a feature or something, but if you do have access to it, then include it. If you don't, quite often production or someone else will organize getting that to the facility, or if it's one facility that's handled offline and online, they'll already have it. So don't stress if you don't have access to the source audio. That's just, if you do have it, it's good to supply. I guess it's green tag. And I get my dopamine hit from ticking it off. Right, guide picture. So for the guide picture for sound, as opposed to the guide picture for grade, there's only two main differences. The first being in the burn-in. So I'm just going to mute that ref. For sound, unless they request otherwise, I will just give them a generic burn-in timecode, just the sequence timecode, without any of the source picture reference. And of course our watermark as well. And the other main difference is the sound. So for sound, I'll always deliver panned audio with all the dialogue going to the left channel and all the sound effects and the music going to the right channel. This is something that a lot of sound facilities will request, since it's something that they can easily pan right to toggle one or the other off and do kind of a live mixture of the two. And it just helps them with their mixing and the previewing, to have both channels there and not doing it within the software and toggling different channels off. They can use their faders. So this is something that is definitely used by them a lot. And in terms of how we make these, I'll use audio mixdowns. So I'll just deselect all my tracks here, and then just enable the sound effects and music ones. We'll start with those, and then I'll go up to timeline, mixdown, audio to sequence. So I'll go mono for these, target mono track 14. So by default, it'll create a new track at the bottom under all your existing tracks. And I'll just set the bin to the same one that I'm using. I have no idea why the default is not that, the current bin that you're using. So I'll go lock delivery, drive, and okay. So this is only going to use the tracks that you have enabled. And if you've marked a region, it will only use that marked region. So since I've only got my sound effects and music marked, it's just going to make a mixdown of that. Cool. Then I can do the same with my dialogue. And a mixdown, in case you're unfamiliar, is just a baked bit of media covering the area of your timeline that you've selected. So you can do video and audio mixdowns. This can be useful if you've got a sequence that won't export because of trying to render certain effects on export and things like that. You can make a mixdown, and then it's only having to convert one piece of media instead of a lot of clips and effects and things as it exports. Mixdowns can be very useful. Great. So now in my bin, I've got two mixdowns, 1 and 2. If you want to be, 1 will be my sound effects and music, and 2 will be my dialogue, because of the order that I did these in, which is a little bit back to front, but that's fine. But if you want to be really sure, you can always just turn on track control panel, turn on the waveforms, and you'll see your dialogue one will be much more full, because there'll be consistent talking throughout. So an area like here, you can see that there's very little effects, there's no music, and there's nothing going on my music and sound effects stem. But there's talking, there's dialogue, so there's sound there. So I'll just name these just to keep my timeline tidy again, by selecting the right track and doing match frame, find bin. And you can map those in the command palette. Match frame will find the clip in the source monitor, and then find bin will find the clip you have selected in one of your monitors in the bin. So I tap match frame, find bin quite regularly, just out of habit. Match frame is actually an essential key to know for any assistant. So just before I can export these, I'm going to go to Audio Mixer, go to my two tracks that have my mixdowns on them, A14 for dialogue, A15 for music sound effects, and all the dialogue I'll throw to the left, and all of the music and sound effects I will throw to the right. And now they are panned. And now we just have to do an export. Now, most sound facilities, most Pro Tools sound sessions and stuff, it doesn't seem to play too well with H.264. They prefer ProRes or DNX. And if you're exporting from Avid, it might as well be DNX. This is something to note because I know a lot of people send references as H.264s, and then post houses end up converting it to DNX anyway. And since if they're going to use a DNX anyway, it might as well be a high quality DNX sent from editorial. So that's going to be our export preset. So with our vision track selected and our mixdown track selected, we can get exporting. Now, if you want to be super careful when you're exporting, by the way, and just make sure that what you're using is right, because sometimes, you can run into trouble here by selecting the, just the relevant tracks you want to export. You can accidentally select the wrong track, and if it's subtle, then you might not necessarily notice it when you're checking the export. So you can just select all the tracks that you will want, and then subclip it out. And now you have a timeline that is just exactly what you want to send, and it's much easier to spot at this stage if it's wrong. So this would be this is something that's worth doing on all your exports. I didn't do it before with the split waves, but it is one that is definitely worth doing whenever you're doing any kind of export. I would rather do this than do marks and select the right tracks and stuff, just because A, it's clearer, and you won't miss anything, and then B, you also have a sequence inside of Avid that is exactly what was sent, rather than having a master sequence and you sent a sub sequence out of that. It's good to be able to have something in Avid that mirrors exactly what was sent. It's easier for matching back. So now that we've got our timeline to export, let's get exporting. So I'll go to our export window. We'll make a new setting, and we'll export this out as a MOV. And we can just have use marks and use selected tracks deselected because it doesn't matter. We're using everything. Make sure you're using project raster, so you're getting the full frame rate the same as your project. These two should match. I don't know why there's not a tick box just to be the same as your project. I find that a bit odd that there isn't one. Keep as legal range, Rec 709. Codec family, this is where we'll change it. So DNX HR. It'll be HR in my case because I'm above HD. This is a 2K timeline. But the vast majority of offline edits will be done in 1920 by 1080, and then it'll say DNX HD, but it's the same codec essentially. LB 8-bit, and I'll change the audio to PCM stereo, and that will be DNX for sound. Okay, and then that can go and sound guide picture. There we go. Hey guys, Jack from the future here. So when I finished this recording initially, I noticed that we're under time. You know, the edit actually came down short. So I thought I would add in another method of doing a guide picture for sound that I know they can quite like. So we've done our panned version like this. We get dialogue left and your music right. But you can also do it with all three stems and then give them the option of how they want to pan it later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make three separate mixdowns, one for my music, one for my sound effects, and one for my dialogue. And then we can throw that onto our guide picture export, and we'll have three discrete channels of each one as separate steps. So I'll show you how we'll go about it. So first I'll make some mixdowns. So we'll go timeline, and I'll also use this opportunity to show you how you can do multiple mixdowns at once with audio, multiple mixes. So go multiple mixes, I get this window up, and I can see all of my tracks here, and I can add multiple mixes. So I'm going to make three stereo mixdowns. So my first one, I want to have my dialogue tracks. The next one, I want to have the sound effects tracks, and the last one, the music tracks. Right, nice and simple. I want it to go into my bin for my lot delivery. That's the right drive. I'll create a new sequence, sure, and that sounds all honky-dory. So I'll just hit mix. So now it's going to go through and create three separate stereo mixdowns as opposed to the mono mixdowns we did before, because I'm not going to necessarily pan these. I'm just going to give them discrete channels, which they can then pan at their end if they want to at the sound facility. This is probably not so much maybe for a composer, but more for the sound mixing guys, because then they have the option as to panning or isolating different tracks in their guide. And there we go, it's finished. So close this window. We can see we've got our three new mixdowns here. And very handy, as opposed to the other way of doing it where it just calls it mixdown.01 or whatever, it actually names them based on the tracks you selected. So I know right away A105, that's dialogue, so I can just rename this dialogue. Sound effects can be named music. Right, now I'm just going to grab the sequence I used before to do my guide picture, the other method. I'll just duplicate that. I'll put in my notes column guide picture. I'll call it direct out. You'll see why in a bit. So I'll launch that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete my two audio tracks. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add three stereo tracks. And I can do this with a right click, new, audio track, stereo, or you can do Shift Command U 3 times. There we go. So now I'll just cut these in quickly. So dialogue, boom, sound effects, and music. Cool. Right. Now we have everything we need to get this exported out. And this is going to be exported out with more or less the same setting that we used before. DNX for sound, just with one slight alteration. So down here in our sound part, for mix under audio, instead of stereo, which would just give us one stereo track on the out export, which would mix all this together and more or less just create a standard export of the film, as if we had just exported it from the timeline, we'll change this to direct out. And then if you select direct out, then it's going to export the video with three discrete audio channels. It's going to replicate exactly what's on your timeline. So it's going to export it out with three discrete audio channels, each of them stereo, and then they can toggle them on and off as they wish. So I'll just hit save as for this, for sound, direct out. And what I'll do is I'll actually export this out so that I can show you. So I'll just pick a little section of it, say this part, and then I'll tell it to respect marks, and I'll actually export this out. Obviously, normally we wouldn't use marks, but this is just because I only want to export a little bit and not wait for the whole thing, so I can actually show you it in the output. Right, now here I've exported this out, and I'm showing my export here, and I've got my three discrete audio channels. So I can see that all three of them are stereo, left and right. And if I actually jump back to Avid here, and I will link that export back in, and then I'm going to load it into the source monitor, you can see I've got 3 audio channels. So I'll turn the waveforms on here, and here's my dialogue on the top. Here should be my sound effects. And here should be my music. So there you go. Then you've got 3 discrete channels, and the sound guys will be able to pan that left and right, mute the individual stems, and change them however they like. So that's one other way that you can do this. Direct Out is a very useful tool for just having your export mirror the audio layout that is on the timeline. So another useful way to do it, one that's requested by some sound spec sheets, so good for you to know. Now to continue back with your regularly scheduled programming. So we can tick off guide picture. Next, EDLs. So I'll go back to my master timeline here, and we'll do some EDLs. And this will be more or less just the same as what we did for grade, except we're doing 2, as we said earlier, a picture EDL and a sound EDL. So I'll load the sequence and just do the 1 and 2. And since I still have my grade turnover preset that we did for the grade earlier, I can just hit preview and save list, since that's just going to be exactly the same. Now I'll go to my EDLs under sound, and I'll just add a suffix to the name that says picture. There's my picture EDL. Now for my sound EDL, I'm going to want all of my tracks, A1 to A12. A13 is a reference of the final export, so that wouldn't be included here. And I will update that. And I can still use the same preset here, since all I'm really after is the source clip name and the reel that it came from. That's everything that I need. So I can now hit save list to one file and add the suffix of sound. Cool. And now, last but definitely not least, our audio AAF. This is the main one. So let's go back to our export menu, and we'll build a setting for our audio AAF. So go to options, AAF, and unlike our grade one, we're going to untick video and tick audio. So export method, we've got consolidate media. So what this is going to do is it's going to create media on the export, whereas link is not going to send any media at all, and copy media is going to copy the existing media. But remember, we've already gave them all the source MXF media. So I'm going to just say consolidate. And handle length, it's like, will be how much handles on either side of what's existing on the timeline do you want to give them. So I'm going to give them 200 frames, which is quite generous. That should be absolutely plenty. Include rendered effects and render all audio effects. This is just to make sure in case I haven't rendered any of the audio that's on the timeline, it will do that on export. Right, then I can leave any of the rest of it. If you've been having issues with mixed audio sample rates or something like that, you could tick these last ones to convert the sample rate and bit depth to a unified setting. But since I set that at the beginning of my project and all of my media has been imported to do the same, I don't need to bother with that. And then down at the bottom, we didn't have to deal with this with the Vision AF. This is where it's going to put the media. So your 3 options are your media drive, where it'll just put it in an Avid Media Files or OMF Files folder at the root level of the drive you're exporting to. You have a folder where you can select the folder that will export the media to, or you can use same folder as the AAF file, and it'll just make an Avid Media Files folder next to your AAF and dump all the media in there. Or you can hit embedded in the AAF, which is what we're going to do. And so then it'll just be one file, and inside that AAF will be all of the timeline data as well as all of the media. So that's all of our settings that we need. And I can hit Save As AAF for sound. And now you'll see when I start this export going, if you look in the bin in the background here, you'll see a whole bunch of clips being created as this export goes out. See, it's starting to make them up here. And so what this is doing is creating fresh audio clips with 200 frame handles as per what's on the timeline. And this is what that AAF, these are the media files that that AAF will be linking to. And that is the reason that when I was initially creating my bins to send to sound, I've created a lock media as well as a lock delivery bin. So then when I'm done this portion, all of this media that's been generated for the AAF, I'll dump that in there just to keep my lock delivery bin nice and tidy. So while that's finishing, I will come over here, get my dopamine hit from ticking off the last one. And I can give these finger tags. So we'll see it there. There's our AAF, it's just over a gig. Not too big because it's a short film and it's only the relevant media. And if I open the rest, other than guide picture, they should all be there. And they are. So that would be all of the sound deliverables that you would need. Obviously we don't have anything in guide picture because I didn't wait for it to export. And our ADR list, we didn't need one. But this would now have all of our sound and all of our grade deliverables. And these folders could be sent on to online where they would be able to relink everything and get to work with their wonderful spit and polish to make it look and sound absolutely amazing. Because colorists and sound designers and mixers and engineers, all the rest of them, are absolute wizards. When you watch cuts in offline for months at a time, and then you get to take a break for a while they do their magic in online, and then you come to a screening and you see it after it's had the full spit and polish, it's amazing. Especially sound, never underestimate sound. Sound is half your movie. But a lot of people, particularly in short films, seem to underestimate it. So here, I'll grab all these clips and dump them into lock media. And there's my final timeline. So, same with our Vision AF, it's created a dot exported, which is just the audio, because that's all that went out in that particular AF. So if you wanted, depending on how nice you were feeling, you could just add some notes next to these. Like this was the AF export. And this would just be to help you or any future assistant who might come back to this bin to revive the lock cut, like I'm doing here for this tutorial, to keep everything nice and tidy and very clear. Because it may be that they have to come back to this lock cut to reopen something or to just check what you've done. So this will keep it super clear, just like how our exports folder is nice and tidy and we can see what we've sent to sound there. So that covers us. We have all of our exported deliverables. And that brings us to the end, both of this video and of the AE100 series, Intro to Assistant Editing in long form. Thank you very much for joining me through these series of videos. I know it's been a while, so if you've watched them all, thank you and congratulations. And don't worry, there will be more videos coming in the near future. I have a whole bunch of stuff planned, mostly around sort of tips and for workflows, so stuff to do with tips for remote working, and best practices for when you're updating Avid Media Composer. So don't you worry, I've got plenty of ideas for new videos, so there will still be one coming every week, but this does wrap up the AE100 course. And who knows, maybe in the future I'll do a deep dive into another topic with another course, or just go straight to AE200. You never know. Thanks again, guys, for joining me on this. Thank you especially to my Patreon supporters. Really appreciate you guys. And everyone is welcome over there, by the way. So, come come take a look. The link is right down below. It's just there. It's right there. But if you've finished all this and you're still somehow looking to watch more Avid videos and more Avid and post-related content, there is plenty more on the channel, and there will be plenty more coming next week, as I've said. So I'm sure I will see at least some of you in other videos. See you then.